All right, guys, back with a very quick video on the difference between the three different types of grants that we covered in this unit: categorical grants, block grants, and project grants. So very quickly, the difference between the three. And most of this is on the slide, so I apologize for reading through it, but I'll elaborate a little bit. Categorical grants. The first type of grant listed, this is money given from the national government, the federal government, to the states with very strict limitations on how it's spent. In other words, it has strings attached. And what that means is the example listed below, which is probably the one that you can relate to the most, is if the federal government gives a specific amount of money to the state of Missouri, like any other state, for the purpose of education, then it is expected that that money be spent on education. They may even have very, very specific purposes, like this money must be spent on college level education. This particular money must be spent on food for kids at school. There's just very, very specific uses for the money in a categorical grant. And if the states don't comply with how the money is spent, then they lose that money. They will no longer receive it. So that's why it says there's strings attached, because it's the states have to spend the money on the things the federal government says with a categorical grant. A block grant is far more general and far fewer strings are attached. So, for instance, a block grant might be given to a state for to help folks who are struggling to make ends meet. So American citizens who would qualify as having some income restrictions, low income. The federal government might give money to cover the cost of a state welfare program, like TANF, for the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. That's just one example, but that money is not going to be very carefully policed by the federal government. It's just, here's a chunk of money for special services for members of your state who meet certain low income requirements. So that's a block grant. So again, categorical grants are somewhat specific. They're given with a specific purpose with strings attached. Block grants are much broader. Oh, you have a certain number of citizens who are living below the poverty line. Here's X amount of dollars. Spend it in your state how you need to spend it to help people who are in poverty. The last one is a project grant. I guess technically this would be the most specific type of grant, because sometimes a project will come along within a state that's very expensive and they will ask for federal help paying for the project. Once the money is given for that project and the project is completed, the state would no longer receive money for that project. So I put an example of, because the community where we live, there's a river called the Platte River. And so if, for instance, you wanted to, a project grant might be that we would need for whatever reason, a new bridge built across the Platte River. The county, Platte County, may appeal to the federal government for a project grant to build this bridge. Once the bridge was done, the federal government would stop giving money for the bridge because it's a specific project. So I hope that helps. That's a specific, some specific examples of categorical, block, and project grants.